got to figure that out, you know? Well, hello and welcome in. It is a Friday edition of the Matt Murphy Radio Show on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Hello, all. Happy Friday. We made it. No more Friday Eve. It's the actual day. It's episode 425 of these proceedings on Super Talk 99.7 WTN with you and me, your humble correspondent and host, until 3 o'clock when we hand off to Brian Wilson and the drive. Yeah, you should probably go ahead and close that. We are in a beautiful, genteel, calming location at California Closets in Berry Hill, and then here's the loudmouth getting his show underway and yelling down the hall and scaring people who have what looked to be delicious. It looked to be champagne. That's what I thought it was. That's what it looked like to me. Kurt Schusterman is the founder of our locational feast at the California Closets Berry Hill location on Winford Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. They have been a part of this community for a long time now, and as a way of showing their appreciation, they're hosting a citywide open house to celebrate 25 years. 25 years of California Closets serving Middle Tennessee. Believe it or not, a quarter of a century in Middle Tennessee. So in an effort to do so, they're celebrating those 25 years. They want you to get the most out of your garage, the most out of your pantry, the most out of your closet. And so you can come take a tour, drink some Amber Falls wine, and enjoy music and food. There was you see the guy playing the guitar? There's a guy strumming the guitar as you walk into California Closets. Once again, it's at 2601 Winford Avenue. They've got snacks. They've got beverages. The whole gang's here, and you're invited to be here as well. Stop by and see us before 3 o'clock today. At some point in the proceedings, it's my understanding that Nashville's Morning News will make an appearance in the form of Dan the Man Mandis. He's showing up at some point between now and 1 o'clock, and he'll be here maybe for the duration. I don't know. If we tie him up and put him on the table, he'll be here until at least 3. Otherwise, who knows? So you better get here early to say hello to Dan if that's your purpose. We've lots to talk about on the show today as well. Before we do, we'll get the pleasantries out of the way. Up and running. I was blaming Bell K for a lack of Super Talk TV. It's actually, I think, probably on our end. Our computer decided it wanted to update itself right before the show started, Bell. So we've got that going on our end. So whatever you've got going on your end, you're all good until we get this going on our end. And when that happens, I'll let you know. Headless Bell's back in the control area, making sure that everything that comes out of our speakers sounds as good as humanly possible. Mac Morey will be back along in the newsroom coming up a little bit later on. Bell, how you doing, buddy? You all right? Good over there?
Everything all well? We're getting there.
Yeah? Yeah. Did you hear what I just said to you regarding the video feed? Okay, I was just making sure you heard me. 615-737-9986. We'll be up and running on the super text line as well, and you're welcome to chat with us at any point during the proceedings. 615-737-WWTN. That's the way to communicate that way, and that is a telephone number and a chat number. So you hit us up there. You can super text us, or you can call us in that regard. Lots to get into. Let's start with the death of Dianne Feinstein. At the age of 90 years old. From a human being perspective, one always is saddened to learn of the death of an individual that had family members, that had loved ones, that had friends, that had people that cared for them very much. I'm going to reflect on the life of Senator Dianne Feinstein by reflecting on where I think we are in modern society in the internet age. There was a time, and I'm not here to bash the public career of Dianne Feinstein the day that she died. If you're looking for that guy, I'm not that guy. I'll be as hard as nails tomorrow or whatever. But I do think you ought to take a moment to realize that as big as our political issue divides may be in the United States of America and around the world, we all got it coming, kid, as Clint Eastwood said in the fabulous feature film Unforgiven. And so I think maybe we could sprinkle a little dose of humanity on top of all of our politics for a moment and suggest that we give people a moment to mourn a loved one that they've lost. At the same time, I'm not comfortable pretending that I had anything for Dianne Feinstein while she was alive, because I didn't, and you know that that's the case. So why would I pretend that I had anything for her, quote unquote, necessarily now when I didn't yesterday or the day before or the day before that. That said, it's more of a reflection on what the internet broadly and what social media more specifically has done to our society. Far be it from me, the guy that, spends 3 hours a day yelling at people on the radio to tell you how to live your life. I'm not that guy. However, there is a coarseness in our society that's been brought about by social media and has been brought about by the internet that I don't necessarily believe is healthy. And what I mean in the case of Dianne Feinstein is simple. That when someone polarizing in politics or in life passed away, there was a time, boys and girls, where the people that loved them would celebrate their lives and the people that didn't care for them would just stay quiet for a minute. And, just hang out in the shadows and wait for an appropriate time to remind people that she was a horrible senator and she was a horrible public servant in California. She was part of the reason that California is the crap hole that it is today. Part of the reason is Dianne Feinstein. That's a public comment on her public policy and her public life. But there was a time when I would just politely keep that to myself to give the grieving people a minute. And what I've noticed on social media, in social media circles, is this, it seems to be almost a desire amongst influencers to see who can make the crappiest comment about somebody that just died. It is, and I understand being honest, and I think I just was with regard to her public life. But I also understand being human, and I don't think some of these folks on social media, on X, or wherever they're posting, sometimes I wonder if they understand what it's like to be human. With some of the, do we really want to be those people? Is that what we really want to aspire to? Now, once again, you separate the results of what she did in her public life. She is the definition of grift and corruption. She's the definition of bad public policy and what it ultimately does to the community where that bad public policy exists. In this case, California. That's one thing. But, am I really going to be the guy to ask that you set that aside for just a moment if you want to be a better human being, or we collectively want to be a better and more civilized society, and just give it a chance to breathe for a minute? That she's dead? Maybe I've now become the old guy, sitting on my front porch talking about the way things used to be, where we had a little dose of humanity. Now, get off my lawn! I'm not being Pollyanna on all of this. I understand that you will be inundated over the next 48 hours with stories of what a wonderful human being she was. I am dead certain that she will lie and stay at the Capitol because that's what we do nowadays. There was a time when that honor was reserved very, very exclusively for a minimal amount of people. We've opened that up, and nowadays you're going to see that sort of thing happen, particularly in as much as she was groundbreaking as a female senator, and she served longer as a female senator than any other woman in the history of the United States of America. So you'll see a lot of gushing out of mainstream media over the next 24 to 36 hours, maybe even across the weekend and into early next week. There will be funeral ceremonies. I have no question that President Joe Biden, whether he knows it or not, now or then, he'll make some remarks. They'll be limited in scope because Joe Biden can't speak for more than 5 minutes without making a fool of himself. So that's going on, and there's old Matt Murphy sitting on the front porch wagging his finger at you youngsters nowadays. I don't know that that's what we should strive for. And I watched it play out in real time this morning after I got up and you read the news. You hit up X, you hit up other social media platforms, and you just watch as the next guy or gal that wants to get noticed thinks the best way. the best way to get noticed, the best way to get clicks, the best way to get followers, the best way to get whatever for themselves is to make the nastiest possible comment that they can possibly make about somebody that just died. Maybe I'm sensitive to it because I just watched someone very influential in my life die literally in the same room with them 48 hours ago. So maybe this is Murphy being a little sensitive to the occasion of the finality of one's life with regard to where politics fits into all of that. I'm not trying to be too much of a downer, but I would just ask for those of you who are compelled, as soon as you hear someone let me go to Twitter and pop off this really hot tweet about what a garbage human being Dianne Feinstein was, maybe that's not the play for us as a society to get better. That's all. That's all. All right, I mentioned we're at California Closets, and we're going to be doing a lot of bouncing back and forth between politics and talking about some of the wonderful work over the last 25 years that Kurt Schusterman and others at California Closets have done for the Nashville community. They're dedicated to servicing this community and serving the community. In celebration of 25 years, Kurt said, I don't want to be on the radio, Murph. I want you to have wonderful people from organizations like Rescue Mission and Our Place, amongst others. I think Thistle Farms is another organization that we'll talk to. So we'll talk to some of those folks over the course of the day. Love to hear from you on the telephone, 615-737-9986. We've also got the super text line up and running. And look, the computer's back up. Look at Mason. I told Mason Fleming is out on site, and he's in charge of the video. And I said, this is pretty cool. And, Belle, you'll appreciate this, right? So now that we've got a new laptop and a new video camera to do on-site video streaming for the Super Talk side, Mason is coming out and helping out in that regard. Now, Kirby's always handled all of the audio technical stuff, and he does an incredible job at that. But Mason is now in charge of the video. So anytime, Belle, the video goes wrong, we can blame Mason, which is nice. I mean, that's so we got that going for us. 615-737-9986, 1217. Take a quick timeout, early timeout. We'll get back to you. It's a First Amendment Freestyle Friday. We're live from California Closets at the Berry Hill location. Stop by and see us on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. It's nice to see you. Yeah, please have a seat.
I always find it so weird to be interviewed on radio.
Why's that?
I worked in international radio for 15 years.
Yeah.
So I'm way more accustomed.
Super Talk 99.7 WTN, getting some things set up here as we broadcast from California Closets this afternoon until 3 o'clock. You're invited to stop by and see us. We're at the Berry Hill location. That is 2601 Winford Avenue. Kurt Schusterman does a great job and has for 25 years. They're celebrating 25 years. Come by, take a tour, have a glass of Amber Falls wine, enjoy some music and some food, and hopefully you can enjoy some conversation along the way. I was just introduced to Miss Carolyn from Our Place, and she's here to talk about her wonderful organization and perhaps what California Closets has meant to the organization. Carolyn, how are you?
How are you this morning? It's good to meet you.
I'm wonderful. It's good to meet you as well. Kirby's going to mess with your face for just a minute. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tell me a little about Our Place.
Well, first, I think we should back up. You said we were going to tell you about our wonderful organization, but the better place to start is how wonderful California Closets is.
Yeah.
And the difference that having a company like this support a small nonprofit like ourselves is the difference it can make. It's not the kind of thing that we would find the money to do. Mm-hmm. And Kurt, the owner, coming to us was huge. And then the difference it makes for our residents, we do affordable housing for adults with developmental disabilities. Affordable housing and California Closets are normal partners. And having a lovely partner that's too nice for affordable housing, our guys walk in, they're getting treated like royalty. And it feels good.
How long has then this affiliation between Our Place and California Closets been going on?
3.5 years.
So tell me a little about the organization, Our Place.
Our place is 8 years old. We currently have 70 residents, half of whom have developmental disabilities, half of whom are neurotypical, could be you or me, and they live together, which enables the person with a developmental disability to live just like you and I do. So they live out in the community, they're independent, but they have natural supports that make life a little bit easier and makes it possible for them to live not with their parents.
When you say it's 8 years old, is that 8 years in Nashville? Is it exclusive to Nashville? It's just a Nashville organization?
It's just in Nashville. We consult a lot with other states that got a request from Hawaii, and they want to replicate what we're doing. So we talk with people all over the country because we're replicatable, and affordable housing is a national crisis.
How did you, Carolyn, get into all of this?
I'm new to disability, but I moved to Nashville 10 years ago. If you're familiar with baseball, and like baseball, do you know Albert Pujols?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I moved here because of Albert, and Albert had a Pujols Family Foundation, and I opened the regional office of that foundation. It worked half with people with Down syndrome and half in the Dominican Republic, where Albert's from, and that's why I moved here. But they said, can you find a problem that we could help fix in Nashville? And the answer was adults with developmental disabilities have no options, period. Mm-hmm. If you're rich, you can go to Frankfort, Kentucky or Senatobia, Mississippi and spend $5,000 a month and get terrific accommodations and supports. In Nashville, unless it's government paid, there are no private pay options, period, let alone not expensive ones. So we couldn't do that exclusively for Down syndrome. It wouldn't work. And so with their blessing, I left and started this with a professor at Vanderbilt.
You know, I didn't know anything about your organization when you sat down, but it's interesting. I worked for years in Birmingham, and you might be familiar with them. Down Syndrome Alabama and Birmingham, Alabama is an organization that works with adult individuals with Down syndrome, and it's very similar to what you're talking about. I don't know that it's housing specific necessarily, but it's very much centered around attempting to give them a life just like anybody else would have their own lives, and oftentimes, sadly, once individuals with Down reach adulthood, they're out of our minds as a society to a certain degree. Have you found that to be the case?
The language the families use and people in the disability community use is that you fall off the cliff. Mm-hmm. So you graduate high school typically at 18. Our community typically would graduate at 22 because they can have community type classes that help independent living skill classes really for another 4 years. But when you turn 22, everything stops. So they call it falling off the cliff.
And I might have this statistic a little wrong, so y'all don't quote me on the numbers, but for years, one of my good friends, Ed Kerr, who ran Down syndrome Alabama, would tell me that 50 years ago, the average life expectancy for someone with Down syndrome was in their teenage years or early 20s, and now we're in high 50s, early 60s, and that we're talking about that gap, right? That between 20-something and 60-something, making sure that they're able to lead a full life of their choosing.
Exactly. That's way more difficult than one might expect.
Right.
The options just are not out there. And now they have a new whammy to deal with. Before, when they didn't live to full lifespans, you didn't know that they had a predisposition to develop early Alzheimer's. And that's a common challenge that a good number of people with Down syndrome now also face if they get up to 50 or 60.
Is it exclusively Down syndrome what you do at our place? Forgive me.
No, it's absolutely not. Yeah. Everybody in the country has autism.
Right.
You have autism. I'm on the autism spectrum.
We're all on the spectrum?
We are all on the spectrum. Probably 3/4 of the people we deal with have autism. Some have Down syndrome. Some have Williams syndrome, Fragile X. There's a lot of challenges that people can have.
And you said how many people do you have currently?
Now we have 70. We're 29 residents with developmental disabilities, and we are the rest graduate students from Vanderbilt, some seniors, some disabled people that are 30s and 40s. We're opening 40 spots in 2 months. On December 1st, we have 4 houses opening near here, not very far from here, and we will have 20 residents with developmental disabilities and 20 without.
How does that work? Do you take donations of like actual locations? I mean, how does it work that you find the spots that you can then develop to open?
We partner with everybody. We're really, really, really small. We're hiring our 3rd person. He starts Monday. So we are teeny, tiny, without partners.
Do we have the entire staff of our place here right now? I'm looking at this gentleman behind you. I'm like, okay. I was publicly educating George. 1, 2, and if you're hire number 3, that means everybody's here.
That's it. We're here. We have amazing partners like California Closets for housing. We have the most amazing affordable housing organization called Woodbine Community Organization. We partner with them.
Well, it's a pleasure to get to know you. It's wonderful to know. I mean, and Kurt, when he told us that he wanted us to come here, he said, "I don't want you to talk about me. I don't want you to talk about our closets. I want you to talk to our partners."
But let me interrupt again. Talking about Kurt, they do special closeting for people who their arms don't work right, and then they might need a basket, not a drawer, because they can't open a drawer, and they're all about it. Whatever you need.
They can retrofit to the needs of the individuals that you serve.
But they also make it really
or for anybody,
They make it really nice. I mean, it's just remarkable. And because the closets are really great size, they're the size of like a twin size bed. But when you need to put all of your stuff in there, it gets small really quickly. So unless you take full advantage of the space, you have less. So California Closets kind of expands a very finite, limited space into it maximizes everything you can do with it.
How can people find out more about our place?
At ourplacenashville.org. And if you are in need of housing, affordable housing, and you are qualified, you are eligible if you earn under $21,000 or under $35,000. The rent is very inexpensive. All of the costs for rent, utilities, Wi-Fi, and our fee is $520 or $580 per month. So it's affordable. And when we say affordable, we mean affordable. And we're looking for typical neurotypical housemates. So if there's somebody out there who doesn't have a lot of money, if they're eligible, which means they are under those 2 ceilings, and they pass a criminal background check, the most important ingredient is that they're nice and that they're kind.
What is the outside of kindness?
That one's huge.
That's a big one. What are the typical, and I know this probably varies from house to house and situation to situation, but what are the typical expectations of that individual in terms of what type of caregiving that they would need?
They don't do any caregiving. They're just they all are residents.
Okay.
And it's actually a two-way street. The graduate students who live with us, they're at the library till midnight. They're coming home at midnight, and our friends will look out the door and make sure they get from the car to the door safely. And that makes the graduate student just it becomes over time a family. They drive each other crazy. If somebody's a slob and somebody's a neatnik, they can get nuts. They fight over the thermostat, over the temperature, but they also
sounds a lot like being married.
Well, it's definitely family.
That's just my sense of humor.
But they support each other. You know, if you need help carrying something or you need a ride, I'm going to the store. I might be the person with the developmental disability, and you don't have a car, and you're neurotypical, and I take you to the store when I'm going, or vice versa. It's just helping out.
All right, ourplacenashville.com?
Ourplacenashville.org.
.org. Very good. Carolyn, thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
I appreciate you. It's 32 after the hour. We'll be back after our short time out. Senator Jack Johnson's going to talk to us about a big victory that came out of the 6th U.S. District Court of Appeals. That's coming up next on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. It is Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Matt Murphy and you until 3 o'clock this afternoon. We're at California Closets. More about that coming up in just a little bit. Right now, we are pleased to be joined by Senator Jack Johnson, who oftentimes swings by our studios, especially during General Assembly or special session, to let us know what's going on. But there was some big news that came out yesterday that we wanted to get his take on. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals rejected the request from certain medical providers in the state and other families to block a Tennessee law banning what they like to call gender-affirming surgery. I think at my nicest, I call it gender reassignment surgery. Some people are going to go all in and call it mutilation, whatever you want to call it. There was a bill passed in the last General Assembly, signed by the governor, passed by both bodies. We're going to talk about it with our good friend, Senator Jack Johnson. Hey, Jack.
Hey, Matt.
How are you?
Good to be with you. I'm great. It's a wonderful day.
I see you've been around good people over at the Waffle House.
That's right. I
over
did
the
this
WH.
in honor of you. Yeah, I stopped at Waffle House on the way over and
Those
had
are good
some
folks
scattered,
over there.
smothered covered. So.
Yeah. Good news out of the Sixth U.S. Circuit. Was this expected? I know. I'm sure that A.G. Scrimetti, would have told you absolutely we're going to win this thing. But there's always a question.
There's always a question, and this has been going on for a while. To set the stage, I'll do it as quickly as I can. So about this time last year, House Majority Leader William Lamberth and I got together and said we want to get some legislation to ban this process of altering a child's body based on what's referred to as gender dysphoria, gender identity issues, where literally you cut off body parts or you prescribe medication that has irreversible effects on a child's body because they're having questions about their gender identity. You could do that when you're an adult, but we shouldn't be doing that to kids, was the basic concept of the legislation. It passed overwhelmingly. As you said, the governor signed it. We've expected it would be litigated and someone would sue. Sure enough, they did. The ACLU represented some families that challenged the legislation. A federal district judge in West Tennessee, Judge Waverly Crenshaw, executed an injunction or a temporary stay on a portion of the law. And which prevented that portion of the law from going into effect. That was immediately appealed by our amazing, outstanding Attorney General Jonathan Scrimetti and his office to the Sixth Circuit. About a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, the Sixth Circuit removed that injunction and allowed the law to go into full effect, but they didn't rule on the merits, if you will, of the actual injunction request. The decision that came down last night, literally less than 24 hours ago, is a full opinion from the Sixth Circuit, the three-judge panel. It was a 2-1 decision, removing the injunction and stating the reasons why, and then remanding the case back to the federal district judge for further consideration. But in effect, in the opinion, they told that federal district judge, don't overturn this law. And they went into great detail. It's a 73-page opinion. I'm prepared to read it all to you right now.
I'm going to go tour some closets. You read it to the listening audience.
I do have a couple of snippets. If there's time, I'd like to read, because there's a broader. I'm talking too long. I know that, but
no,
this
you're
is
not.
so
No, you're not.
this is so incredibly important and exciting. This is going to have much broader implications. As a state legislator, serving in a state legislature, we get very annoyed at these unelected, lifetime-appointed federal judges coming in and throwing our laws out or staying their implementation. And this opinion goes into some very specific detail, more or less sending the message to some of these federal district judges. And I can read a couple of lines from the opinion.
This was a Memphis judge.
The Memphis judge was the trial court, the district court judge.
So,
that joined
and I want you to read that, but I mean, just to follow up on what you just said, it's not a matter of the justice system doing its job, doing its work, walking through the process. The complainants in this case, they judge shop. Mm-hmm. And they know how to judge shop to get it into the right courts.
That's right.
Not because they believe, and I don't think for a moment the ACLU or these other organizations think that they're ultimately going to win on the merits of the case. They just want to try to delay and stymie and block the duly elected body, the General Assembly of the state of Tennessee, from doing the work that the people want them to do.
One of the and I know some of your listeners probably would, and I encourage them to go read this opinion. I've read most of it. I mean, literally, this happened last night. But there are some really, really powerful language in this opinion about democracy and state rights and states' rights and the authority of people like me that are elected. I'm elected. I'm accountable to my constituents. My colleagues in the Senate and the House are duly elected as well. And we're the ones who should be making these decisions, not a federal district judge in some, West Tennessee federal district.
So tell me a little about how they commented on that concept, or tell me specifically what piqued your interest as you read the 74 pages, so I didn't have to.
That's right, like you watch CNN.
Exactly. I was watching CNN. You're reading the report.
Yeah. So here's a line from the opinion. Before starting down this road, it is well to remember that the most deeply rooted tradition in this country is that we look to democracy to answer pioneering public policy questions, meaning that the federal courts must resist the temptation to invoke an unenumerated. Oh, my phone just went dead on me, so I was on a good roll there.
Oh, no, so good.
Effectively, an unenumerated guarantee to substitute their views for those of legislatures. And Matt, not to get too far into the weeds, this is stemming from the Dobbs decision, which was, of course, a landmark decision from the Supreme Court last year that sent the abortion issue back to the states. So I think what you're seeing in the courts, and I'm not an attorney, I'm not a constitutional expert, but I am a legislator, I'm a lawmaker. And what we're seeing from the courts, the Supreme Court and from the appellate level court, is we need to start returning power back to duly and constitutionally elected people.
I find it curious that the folks in the General Assembly that are of a different mindset than you, that would classify themselves as the Democrats, they are in the distinct minority in the General Assembly. But during the end of the regular session and during the entirety of the special session, not so much in the Senate was a lot more of a calming body, but in the House, where things can tend to get a little hotter, they declared that democracy demanded certain things. Democracy demanded that the will of the majority be suspended for the desires of the minority, which is
antithetical to democracy.
It fascinates me because the sound bites that they get over on the local networks, or in some cases the national networks, the hashtag never CNNs of the world, are completely 180 degrees out of phase with what they seem to desire to want to happen with regard to policy such as this.
It's the majesty, I say the majesty of democracy. And I know your listeners are going to say, we're not a democracy, we're a republic.
Yeah, we get it.
But I think that the Sixth Circuit, the three-judge panel, what they're saying in here when they're using the term democracy, it is, in fact, that people who are going to make very important decisions. I mean, this is a very weighty piece of legislation, and Leader Lamberth and I worked very hard on this and talking with our colleagues that when you go in and say we're going to create a prohibited medical practice, meaning we are going to ban the ability of doctors to chop off body parts or prescribe these medications that will have irreversible effects on children's lives. I believe in smaller government. I don't want more government, but as I've said on your show and others, we do have a compelling interest to protect children. And our ability to do that comes from the fact that we're elected by our constituents.
This issue is similar in its nature, in concept and principle, to the issue of deciding what we should or should not allow in our school libraries with regard to children having access to material that is not age appropriate to those children. And the political left in that case they've declared, the Republicans want to ban books, they want to burn books in the schoolyard, which is ridiculous. Right. The suggestion is being made that you want to somehow eliminate this material from public life, when in fact you're simply stating if the librarians and the local school boards are not going to monitor the situation and make sure that there's not inappropriate material available to young people in our public schools, then the General Assembly is duty-bound, because that's what they're elected to do, to act. You want the local system to act, but if it won't, then you and similarly, I would love for you guys to not have to do any of this for a lack of needing to.
Right. Because it's being handled elsewhere.
Right.
Well, and on that same line, it's the whole conversation about the city of Nashville, Davidson Metro Nashville, and the General Assembly, and there's been some tension here. But again, I believe in local governments, I believe in local control, but ultimately those political subdivisions are created by and accountable to the state and the General Assembly, constitutional. Can I give you one more line?
Yeah, come on.
Because this is
I like it.
This is just so good. And again, you have to understand the context. I'm a state legislator. I don't like judges undoing things that we have done. So the last line I'll give you from the opinion: life tenured federal judges. Keep in mind, these judges appointed by the President of the United States, confirmed by the Senate. They serve for life. They're not elected. They're appointed, and they're confirmed by the Senate. So life tenured federal judges should be wary of removing a vexing and novel topic of medical debate from the ebbs and flows of democracy by construing a largely unamendable constitution to occupy the field.
Nice.
Isn't that beautiful?
It is.
I mean, it's just saying, hey, judges, you're going in and trying to rule things unconstitutional, and that's not what the Constitution says.
Well, and as I was growing up and learning more about our system of government, the three separate branches, and the importance of those branches as constructed by the Founding Fathers, one of the things that you learn is, like, for example, and I think the same can perhaps be said of the General Assembly in the state of Tennessee, that in the Congress, that, you know, the House is where all the hot debates go on. The Senate is oftentimes that cooling pool where that hot topic goes to the Senate. We're going to cool off. We're going to consider this a little more carefully. I'm not saying one body's more important than the other.
Absolutely not.
Both of those bodies and their roles are very important. And similarly, the judicial branch of government is really there to call balls and strikes.
That's it.
We're not here to comment on the nature of the legislation. We're here to comment on whether or not it meets constitutionality.
Absolutely.
That's
and once the law is passed and there's some kind of litigation, to apply the law as passed by the legislative body, be it the United States Congress, be it the Tennessee General Assembly, Texas Legislature, whatever the case might be, is to do that. But what we have seen, and you hear the term judicial activism, activist judges, and I'm careful to utilize that, but you find judges using their position to create law, and that is not the purpose of the judiciary. And you can create law by judicial activism, some type of judicial decree, but you can also create law by saying that the law passed by a legislature is not going to go into effect. You have superimposed yourself as a judge in place of the duly constitutionally elected legislature.
And one of the things noted by a loyal listener to the show, and you may have made mention of this and I missed it, that in addition to upholding all of this, the Sixth Circuit kind of pointed a finger back toward the quote-unquote transgender community and said, look, you continue to classify yourself as this marginalized community when you have healthcare providers. You're not marginalized in any other way than any other perhaps minority group in the United States of America is marginalized. The law is applied to you equally and equitably as it is applied to everyone
absolutely
else.
Of course, and that's the way it was passed. Now, I do want to be very clear, this isn't a final decision on the merits of the bill, and this is, I've had to have these attorneys explain this to me. The case has been remanded back to this federal district judge, but again, when you read this 73-page opinion, and there was a dissenting, the ruling was 2-1. There was one of the three judges that dissented and issued a dissenting opinion. But the ruling from the Sixth Circuit, the three-judge panel, back to the district judge was, you need to go back and reconsider this, and you need to consider it in this light. And I don't see how anyone could look at this, including a federal district judge, and apply the standards set forth by the Sixth Circuit and not allow this law to go into effect.
And once again, just to back up as we kind of wrap this up, for those who have not been paying as much attention to the case, it is not, you're not banning any sort of surgical procedure between a doctor and an adult in the state of Tennessee.
That's exactly right.
You're saying that this life-changing surgery or puberty blockers or other things that are going to permanently alter one's physical and biological makeup should be held off on until you reach the age of majority.
Exactly. And in Tennessee, that's the age of 18. A lot of people say, well, golly, 18-year-olds, they're not fully developed. That's true. But at 18, you're an emancipated adult under Tennessee law. So if you want to make an appointment on your 18th birthday to go have a body part removed or to begin taking some type of powerful drug that's going to alter your body, you can certainly do that. We're just not going to allow that to take place with children who are not in a mental place where they should be making those decisions.
And I had this in-depth discussion with someone earlier in the week, kind of away from my job on the radio. And, it's important to get perspective from people who are kind of removed from what we do. And the person I was talking to was convinced, they had been convinced that if they don't allow these types of procedures for young people, that young people are going to die. And I pushed back on that notion because that's the argument on the other side.
That's right.
That this is life, that this will threaten the lives of younger people. And there is no statistical data that indicates, and God forbid anyone contemplate or commit suicide, but there's no statistical data to suggest that there is an uptick in the level of suicide amongst these groups than other groups. They can't provide that statistical data. They claim that it exists, but I've never seen it.
Well, and another thing, the opinion, which we haven't really talked about, excuse me, goes into great detail about are the studies. And we talked, Europe has been doing these types of procedures for even longer than the United States, and they've pulled back on them because they're realizing, yes, your rate of suicide actually goes up among people who've gone through this transition process. So there's a lot of great data in there, and it's a big decision, not just for this legislation that I feel very passionately about, but for states' rights and the 10th Amendment, state sovereignty in general.
Jack, thanks for stopping by and giving us an update.
You bet.
It's been absolutely fabulous.
And you did buy me a closet, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is it
no. Dan told me I was going to, but Mandis said, no, I got Jack Johnson. Don't worry about it. So he's going to handle you.
Okay,
he's going to take you to your closet in just a moment.
Right,
we'll take a short time out. It's 12:53. Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
From ABC News, I'm Michelle Franzen. The House stopgap measure to extend the deadline of government funding has failed in a full vote, leaving the nation on the verge of a shutdown in just 36 hours. ABC's Jay O'Brien says that's little time for a fix.
A lot of that legislative moving around takes time, and the deadline is Saturday at midnight. I can tell you the lawmakers that I'm speaking with have almost all resigned themselves to the possibility, or the likelihood rather, of a government shutdown. One said to me, it's not if we shut down, it's for how long we shut down. So not a high level of optimism here on Capitol Hill.
The White House estimating 3.5 million federal workers will be impacted with working without a paycheck. A vase of white roses now marks where Dianne Feinstein sat in the Senate. The 90-year-old died at her home in D.C. last night. Feinstein, a centrist Democrat from California, shattered gender barriers, becoming the first woman mayor of San Francisco and then the first female senator to lead the Intelligence Committee. Republican Senate leader Mitch McConnell, and sometimes rival, calling her a friend.
Dianne was a trailblazer in her beloved home state of California, and our entire nation are better for her dogged advocacy and diligent service.
The murder of rapper Tupac Shakur was considered a cold case for decades, but a renewed investigation has now led to an arrest.
According to a senior law enforcement official, a suspect was arrested Friday morning in connection to the murder of Tupac Shakur. The charges are expected to be announced later. It comes weeks after Las Vegas police moved in and raided the home of Dwayne Keith Davis, who has long claimed to have been one of only 2 living eyewitnesses to the murder. It's been believed by investigators that he was in the car that night but didn't actually pull the trigger. A grand jury was impaneled to decide if charges would be filed. Alex Stone, ABC News.
On Wall Street, stocks trading down and late trading this afternoon. You're listening to ABC News.
Uh-oh, Brad's buzzed.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Here we go, boys and girls. Hour number 2 of the Matt Murphy Radio Show, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. It is 1:06, and I am minding my P's and Q's because the boss is in the house. We're at California Closets. Now, they aren't the boss, although we appreciate everything they do for the community and everything they've been doing for 25 years to help your closet space, your garage space, etc., etc. Kurt Schusterman is offering you some wine, some cheese. Dan Mandis has already availed himself of wine and cheese. We were just talking about that. And I still have yet to see my little plate of wine and cheese, but that's all good. I'm on the radio right now. Dan is here. Stop by and say hello to Mr. Mandis. Say hello to Matt Murphy and the gang at California Closets. It is also a Friday edition of the Matt Murphy Show. That means it's a First Amendment Freestyle Friday, 615-737-9986 on our telephones and on our super text line. You're welcome to weigh in on the subjects of the day. And Friday also means that we have a very special guest on the line. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Friday.
Good morning, Americans. It's Friday.
Our good friend, Tennessee native, legal correspondent Jay St. Clair, joining us on the show to talk all things the law. And there are many items to get into with Mr. St. Clair. Let's welcome him in. Hey, Jay, how's it going?
You know, it's going great, man. You know I'm a man of simple pleasures, and I'm so excited to tell you. I finally learned how to crack an egg without getting little pieces of the shell in the skillet. And I'm just so happy with myself.
Is this your hold on a second. Is this your flat surface theory?
Yes. No, it's not a theory. I read it on the internet.
Well, then it has to be true, Jay.
No, it's proven fact.
The idea that it is better to crack an egg on a flat surface than on a sharp surface because you prevent chippage, I guess.
That's right. And I was using too much force. I think my fundamental problem is I was just hitting it too hard.
Have you figured out how to do it one-handed yet?
No, that's next week.
Yeah, I can help you. You know, that Waffle House technique coming in handy on occasion. I can help you with the one-handed technique. Although one-handed is going to be a little bit messier than two-handed, Jay. I'll tell you.
Yeah, I understand. Well, I still get yolk on my hands, but I don't get shell in the skillet.
Well,
that's the important part.
It's the little things in life.
Yep.
Let's enter an arena of your expertise. The UAW folks, they've announced, I guess, today. I think it's 5,000 or 7,000 more workers will get on the picket line. They're expanding their strike, saying that the big motor companies are just giving lip service to negotiations. They're not really invested. Give me your view where we are from 50,000 feet.
You know, it's just kind of classic labor disputes, man. In the law, we actually speak of the parties resorting to their economic weapons. That's what the law calls it. And so it's just kind of economic warfare right now. The unions are trying to inflict as much financial pain on the companies as they can to get what they want in the contract. And the companies are holding firm, and, there's a little economic pain on the union side. The UAW has got a strike fund, but I think the weekly benefits are only $500, which is significantly less than what most of the union members make. So they're just slugging it out, and eventually, somebody's going to run out of money. Or, well, not run out of money, but is going to decide that the financial loss is no longer worth it. But, could take a while.
Do you have a sense of where the automakers are on this, and are they in lockstep? Is it possible that Ford might think of this differently than GM, or GM might think of this differently than Chrysler or whatnot?
Yeah, no, absolutely they can, because they're different businesses, right? I mean, and so they each have their own situations, but they're competitors too, right? I mean, that's the other part of it. And so, one of them cannot afford to be really way out of balance with the others when it comes to the cost of production. But some of the issues like our own scheduling, I think they're 32-hour work weeks. One company may be set up to do that better than another company. They may have automation. So, yeah, they won't listen. Well, right now, they all don't have the same contract. I don't think they'll end up with the same contract. But my guess it'll all be pretty similar when you look at the bottom line cost to the company.
So are they, and I did not do a deep dive into this, but I did see the top line on this, and you tell me if this is accurate or not, that the union is arguing for a 32-hour work week, but they want to get paid as if it were a 40-hour work week?
Well, I mean, they want enough of a pay raise to make up for the lost 8 hours. So, yeah, I guess you could say that. They want a 40% raise. That's hourly rate. But then I only work 32 hours. So, yeah, you could basically say they want to work 4 days a week and still get paid for 5 days a week.
I mean, is that possible? I mean, maybe.
You know what? That's kind of like being a radio talk show host.
Yeah, everybody knows that we only work 3 or 4 hours a day, Jay. I mean, I'm looking at Dan Mandis, my boss right now on the sofa, and this man has worked 4 hours a day all week, no more. I mean, he's living the life of Riley, Jay.
Absolutely. He must be represented by the UAW.
Yeah. Are you Jay wants to know if you're represented by the UAW, because apparently our contracts were negotiated by the same people that are negotiating the UAW contracts. So it's a matter of, do the automakers feel enough pain quickly enough to acquiesce to the long-term demands of the union? Do I have it right?
No, you said that exactly right, man.
I don't ask you often to get out your crystal ball anymore, Jay, because you don't like doing that.
Yeah.
But do you think, let me ask it this way then. Do you think you and I, maybe not next Friday, because I happen to be off next Friday. I'm taking a day off to be with a really good friend of mine, but maybe the Friday following. Are we still talking about this 2 Fridays from now? Do you think?
As an active strike.
As an active strike.
I have no factual basis for this, but you want me to guess, so I'll guess. No, I'll bet you that the strike will be resolved within 2 weeks. That's just a pure guess.
Mm-hmm. And do you have a feeling that as much bluster as is being presented, because in these cases, the companies, they talk a little bit to the mainstream media. They structure press releases in such a way where they don't say a lot.
Right.
It seems that the strikers, the union, talks a lot more and talks with a little more bravado and bluster. With all of that going on, you would feel like if it gets negotiated, they're going to have to give up something.
Yeah, both sides will declare victory. I had a lawsuit one time, man. This is one of the strangest lawsuits I was ever involved with. We had a really great case. The other side had a terribly weak case. And then as we were, a month or 2 away from trial, the other side wrote to the judge and said, well, we've obviously prevailed and demonstrated how right we are. So we really won this case, therefore we dismiss it. That's a true story, man.
Wait a minute. So the 2 sides were at loggerheads, and the one side was clearly going to win, and right before the one side won the case, the other side said, we feel like we've won this case, so we're dropping out.
Yeah, well, they declared victory. We've won. Huh. See you later. No need for a trial. We clearly won this case.
Jay St. Clair is with us. He's our legal correspondent, Tennessee man, and a good friend of the show. Let's turn our attention to action that just happened in the state of Tennessee, or about the state of Tennessee, out of the 6th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. They have now rejected a request from certain medical providers and families to block this Tennessee law that was passed by the General Assembly and obviously signed into law by the governor. And I know that you've taken a look at this. What's your overall thought on the decision by the 6th Circuit, Jay?
Doesn't surprise me, man. This is a very unsettled question right now, and they talk about that a lot. It basically turns on the fact that states have great discretion in regulating medical care. And that's just a fact. Even medical care that the patients want and the doctors want. I think the best analogy to this is doctor-assisted suicide. Many states, I'm sure Tennessee included, make that illegal. Well, they can do that. Even though somebody goes to court and says, well, wait a minute, I want to die, and I want a doctor to help me so that it's painless. It is entirely constitutional for Tennessee to say, no, we're just not going to let you do that. Or we're not going to let you take experimental drugs that haven't been approved by the FDA. And, if it were just at that level, this would really be a pretty easy case. The argument they're making is really a linguistic sleight of hand, man. They're saying, oh, but here, this is because of sex. And governments can't discriminate because of sex. Well, that's a little linguistic trick. And the court figured that out. It really isn't because of sex. It's because of medical care. They treat men and women the same. There's no difference between the two. Well, they have to talk about sex, right? Because the medical treatment's about sex. But they're not treating boys and girls differently. So it really just falls back on the state's general power to regulate medical care. Not a very surprising decision to me.
Well, and in particular, I would say regulate medical care regarding individuals not of the age of majority, right? So
exactly.
Under the age of 18, even though some of these individuals might have parental consent, the state believes that at some point they have the authority to override whatever parental consent is given.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And yes, the fact that it involves people under age 18, frankly, gives the state even more power. They have even greater power to regulate medical care to minors.
Jay St. Clair is with us for one more segment. If you have a comment, if you have a question for our legal correspondent, send it in, 615-737-9986. We're at California Closets today. We'd love for you to stop by and say hello to us. They're celebrating their 25th year in the city of Nashville. California Closets. You can find out more. Well, we'll tell you more in just a couple of minutes about how you can get to us and how you can find out more about California Closets. It's 18 after the hour. Quick time out. More of your calls and questions for Jay St. Clair coming up next on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Super Talk 99.7 WTN, it's 122. You're reminded, get in your questions for our legal expert, Jay St. Clair, at 615-737-9986, 615-737-WWTN. We're at California Closets today until 3 o'clock. You're invited to stop by at the Berry Hill location. That is at 2601 Winford Avenue. Kurt Schusterman, very generous in opening up his doors. Beautiful facility here. There are tours of their Center of Excellence at Berry Hill. They've got sparkling wine from Amber Falls, a charcuterie board, unless Dan Mandis has eaten all of it. I don't think that – he's giving me a look. I don't think that's the case, but he did mention that he had a couple of pieces of cheese, and he felt guilty about it. I was like, man, you're on vacation. Your vacation starts right now at California Closets. 25 years in business, and we'll be talking more about those guys coming up in just a couple of minutes. 123, a number of your questions already coming in, and we'll get to them. Jay, I want to ask you, have you focused on I know you know that the new court is in session, I guess Monday, right? Is the official first day of the United States Supreme Court. Is there anything on your anything on your radar screen that you've noticed that might be of interest to the audience, or have you paid attention to the docket at all?
Honestly, I hadn't, man. I've been focusing on my docket, to be perfectly honest with you. But, there's a chance that some of these Trump cases, criminal cases, may wind their way up there. But I don't see anything, like the abortion case or some of those other, just really, really big cases. I don't see that now.
And you and I didn't talk about this before we came on, so it might be a slight curveball, but were you surprised when the Trump people, I guess it was yesterday, decided they weren't going to press the issue of moving his case to federal court over in Georgia? Did that surprise you at all?
No, not really. But frankly, I'm not sure they had really good legal grounds for that, man. I mean, it's really kind of technical legal stuff, but I don't think that was a winning argument.
Philip writes in at 615-737-9986 and says, can you ask Jay this for me? Well, certainly I can, Philip. My neighbor had a tree that's dying and constantly is dropping limbs and larger pieces in my yard and does not care to help me pick them up.
Yep.
Bad neighbor. I've been picking them up for over a year now, and I've asked him repeatedly. I've offered to help him have it removed. He refuses my offer to pay half of the charges. Philip wants to know, Jay, is there anything legally that he can do to have the tree removed?
No, absolutely you can, Phil. It's a great question. If it were a healthy tree and then just, a tornado came through and knocked it over, then that's not your neighbor's fault. This is an unhealthy tree. He knows about it, Philip. It is a nuisance. He knows that it's falling on your property. If it causes damage, he's responsible for that. I applaud you for saying to him, look, let's just go halfers on it. That's a very reasonable proposition. I wouldn't go over there and cut it down without his permission. I made that mistake as a very young homeowner, and that's not the way to approach
Wait, whoa. You did?
Well, I didn't cut a tree down, but I cut down some photinias, if you know what those are. A shrub. My neighbor had a photinia hedge row separating our houses, and it was totally out of control, man. So I said, well, I'll be nice to her and go over and trim her bushes. Ooh, she didn't like me trimming her bushes.
Do not trim the neighbor's bushes without her permission, Jay.
Never again. Well, that's a mistake you make once in life, man. Like asking a woman you don't know that how long she's been pregnant.
Yeah, that's a bad move. No, that's great. That's a great answer to the legal question. Here's Chris who writes in.
You could sue him. You could sue him, but the better solution is trying to work it out with him.
Well, and it sounds like Philip's done everything he can regarding working it out. If you're offering to pay for half of tree removal, that seems like a fair deal, and sounds like you're dealing with a grump.
I know, I agree. What he needs, what he needs, man. It's a lawyer letter. People just, react better to lawyer letters than personal letters. Or the other thing you could do, depending on what the cost is just go ahead and offer to cut the whole tree down. I don't know, let's say it's $1,000. You've already offered to pay $500. Is it worth it to you for another $500 to get rid of the tree?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it keeps it from falling on your fence or falling on your house. But I don't know. He's probably a Georgia fan, and even if you offer to, pay the whole cost, he'd say, nope, I ain't cutting my tree down.
Speaking of Georgia, speaking of the SEC and a football rivalry, what are you doing on my social media platforms pretending that Dolly Parton put out a Tennessee Volunteers CD? That is a ridiculous lie from the pit of hell, Jay.
I will send you multiple videos of Queen Dolly singing Rocky Top.
Well, it's not.
The other brothers sound pretty good. She sounds great.
Well, it's not Dolly's fault that you rednecks over in Knoxville ruined a perfectly good song. That's not her fault. I'm not going to blame her for that. Chris wants to know, this is an interesting, very obscure question. Is there a legal difference between a law that states this is not allowed versus you have to do something?
Well, yeah. I mean, sure. It is not allowed to drive drunk. You must wear a seatbelt. So, sure, there are some laws that prohibit actions. There are other laws that require actions. And I don't think as a blanket that there's a real difference between the two. You must have a driver's license to drive a car, but you can't run a red light. So, yeah, there's a difference, but there's not a difference in enforceability. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, I think you are. In the context, Chris just added additional context with regard to the Tennessee law disallowing gender mutilation, as he described it, for those under the age of 18. But then you put that into context with some of the laws that were considered. I don't know that any laws were passed in any state regarding COVID-19 vaccination requirements.
Yep.
But I think the courts were pretty consistent that while private companies could or certain industries could, I don't think any court ruled in favor of the ability for the government to require a mass vaccine.
I understand what Chris is saying. Yeah, absolutely. And they talk about that in this case, Chris. They say, look, laws that prohibit medical procedures are much more easily enforced than laws that require medical procedures. Absolutely. The law does not look kindly on forced medical care.
And Jay, we'll leave it here, and I think it's a perfect place to do so. Kathy writes in and says, Matt, tell Jay those Dolly videos are AI generated. I know one thing that's not AI generated on Dolly.
I don't know what that means, but I think I've got to go research them by watching those videos many times.
Jay, always a pleasure to talk with you, my friend, and we'll do it again very soon. Take care.
Thank you, buddy.
There's Jay St. Clair, our legal correspondent, good friend of the show, and it's always good to talk to him on Friday. It's 1:31, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Quick timeout. Back in a moment. It is Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Matt Murphy and you on this First Amendment Freestyle Friday. We're at the Berry Hill location of California Closets. Come on out and see yours truly. Dan Mandis is here. The whole gang is around. Kurt Schusterman can show you around and show you some of the various closet ideas that they've got, celebrating 25 years of helping Tennesseans get the most out of their closets, garages, and pantries. Kathy wants to know if this means that I'm coming out of the closet. Well, I just saw Dan come out of the closet. So, I mean, for what it's worth, I will probably go in and, yes, come out of a closet at some point over the course of the day. I bet you didn't think I'd say that, did you, Kathy? All right, do we have our good congressman?
No, we don't. He's attending to an emergency right now, actually,
okay.
And I'll explain that to you off air.
Okay, very good. All right, so we shifted some things around because there's a lot of activity going on in Washington, D.C., and I communicated with Congressman Andy Ogles about the possibility of giving us an update today. And, and frankly, if I may spend a moment lauding the crew at Super Talk 99.7 WTN, because I think collectively between Nashville's Morning News and Dan Mandis, between Chris Hand, Matt Murphy, yours truly, and Brian Wilson on the drive, we've had every congressman in Middle Tennessee on, and potentially on multiple occasions over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, covering the possibility of a DC shutdown as comprehensively as anyone in media, to include just on our show. We've had Scott Desjardins on this week, Tim Burchett on this week, John Rose on this week, yesterday Mark Green on, and Andy Ogles. Today there's 5 out of our 9, is that right? 9 congressmen in the state of Tennessee. Plus, add to that, Marsha Blackburn and Bill Haggerty on regularly on a variety of the shows. And you are covered in terms of perspective by your elected officials as to what is going down in Washington, D.C. So the expectation is, and in conversation with Andy, I asked if he had an update to call us at any point that he had said update, and he called us a little while ago and said that he potentially had one, but he had to attend to another matter very quickly. But we'll get you updated on what's going on. Frankly, it's as simple as this. A group of Republicans in Washington, D.C. have decided that they believe in the basic maxim of Albert Einstein, in as much as if you continue to do the same thing over and over again and you expect a different outcome or a different result, it is by definition insanity that you should expect that when you're doing the same thing. The old adage, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. Well, we've done the same things over and over again with regard to our budgeting process, with regard to our lack of passing additional budgets on an annual basis, and doing so in a way that you separate the various budgets so that you can get down into the into the wallow in the muck and the mire and really piece apart what is necessary and unnecessary spending on the part of the American people to try to eat into the overspending that we see on an annual basis. Well, Kevin McCarthy was trying a little bit more of a go-along to get along, and there was a stopgap funding bill that was proposed today, and a group of Republicans joined in all of the Democrats in a procedural vote that failed. Final passage of the vote that would have provided a stopgap failed by a vote of 198 to 232. 21 Republicans. I don't have the vote count, but I would be willing to bet you dollars to donuts that Andy Ogles was among those that said no, we're not going to play ball on this game or on this deal. Representative Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, Nancy Mace of South Carolina, and once again, I don't know this because I've not seen the vote count, but I'd be willing to bet Andy Ogles was among the 21 Republicans that voted against it. It's a blow to McCarthy. Obviously, this indicates that we will see a shutdown as soon as tomorrow. Federal government shutdown is not the end of the world. And I wanted to kind of reset that as well because, frankly, if you don't, the majority of the United States of America will not notice that the federal government is shut down. Outside of possibly going to a federal park and seeing that a federal park has been closed, outside of perhaps you have a member of the military in your family and their paycheck might get delayed if this lasts beyond a couple of weeks. That might mean something to you. Obviously, I understand it means something to those families who depend on those paychecks, and I'm sensitive to that, but I'm also cognizant of the fact that on the back end, they get recompensed for their pay. Federal government funding expires at the end of the day tomorrow. So if the House and Senate, if they don't strike a deal by then, there's at least a partial shutdown that threatens to force all federal functions deemed, quote, non-essential to grind to a halt. But frankly, based on the listening audience response to our conversations about this, there's a little bit of confusion as to why the federal government is involved in non-essential functions at all. I think we need, considering that we are $33 trillion in debt, I would suggest to you that perhaps we need a little more stoppage of the non-essential funding. 3180 wants to know if Ukraine will get all of their money. Joe Biden promised Vladimir Zelensky when he was in the United States of America that there would not be a suspension of the money flowing to Ukraine. And I don't know how he can potentially control that, except that I suppose the executive branch of government gets a certain amount of latitude once the Congress has passed some spending measures with regard to Ukraine. Do contractors get their back pay? Yes, contractors will get their back pay, I promise you. Every person that contracts with the federal government in every government shutdown in the modern era has been made whole on the back end of the government shutdown. And 2963 says, I thought the last budget was for 2 years. The budgeting process is always for 1 year, although sometimes they utilize a tactic by which they expand that beyond the 1 year, and they talk about a 10-year curve and trying to get spending down over the course of 10 years. And that's oftentimes a math tactic in order to convince you that they're saving money when they're really not. Congressman Andy Ogles joins us right now to talk about the lack of a deal and how all of that fell apart. It was a vote of 198 to 232, with 21 Republicans saying, no, we're not going to go along to get along. We're not going to continue to do the same old, expecting a different outcome. Congressman Andy Ogles, thanks for joining the Murphy Show. How are you, sir?
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, there's a lot going on up here. Obviously, we held the line. And look, let me back up. In January, there was a promise made to the American people that we would pass 12 appropriations bills. And there's a deadline that's assigned to that, September 30th, right? And so when we went into July, when we went into the last few days of July, and we were sent home for the August work period, what it's called, at that point, it was impossible for us to finish because when we came back to D.C., we only had 3 weeks left. So leadership made a decision, a conscious decision that we're just going to send everybody home and we'll just do the CR again. And I'm frustrated that, look, if I'm speaker, and I would think you would do the same thing if you were speaker, is look, guys, we've got 3 days left in July. If we don't get this done, I'm going to keep you here next week. And if we're not done next week, I'm going to keep you here the week after that because that's what the American people want. Last night I had a teletown hall, had a little over 6,000 people on it, and we polled the audience. Obviously not everybody responds, but it's a decent sampling. We had 90% say shut it down. We also polled my district, a scientific poll, and we had 72% say shut it down. So I think people are frustrated with the way Congress works or doesn't work. And what we're trying to do is restore what would be considered regular order, which means you actually pass the appropriations on a timely fashion. In 50 years, the appropriations process, regular order, has only been achieved 5 times in 50 years, and that's obscene.
Well, and you answered within that opening statement, you answered one of the questions I had, Congressman Ogles, because I did not see a breakdown of the vote, but I made an assumption, and I think it was a correct one, that you were among the 21 voting against allowing for this continuing resolution. And you've been steadfast in this, and you reflected on part of the reason why you're drawing a line in the sand. And I think your constituents and the listeners of Super Talk appreciate that line, in as much as this wasn't important enough to Speaker McCarthy to hold you guys in Washington, D.C. in August, which he clearly could have done. He made the decision not to do that. And I want to ask you to explore this just a little bit further, because I feel like that decision was made on the premise that there would hold you guys over a barrel and force you to do something your constituents don't want you to do. And thankfully, today, y'all said no.
No, I think that's accurate. And so, last weekend, and I did a video in front of the Capitol. Most members of Congress went home. I was one of the ones that stayed behind, that worked on the rule that allowed. So last night, 4 additional appropriations bills came to the House floor. 3 of them passed. It was Homeland Security, Department of Defense, State and Foreign Operations, and Ag. So the House of Representatives has funded our military. We funded our border and some of our foreign relations stuff. Ag didn't go through, but that's being said, so we wanted to put forth, the Senate could take those up if they wanted to. They probably won't, but no, I think you're right. I think there was a conscious decision that they felt that they could put our back against the wall. And so, the idea of voting for a CR turns my stomach, to be honest with you, because it's what's wrong with this place. We have $33 trillion worth of debt. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, you got to understand that that's not good, right? And so, but a 7-day, would I be willing to have that conversation? Maybe, because, 7 days from now, if we haven't passed another appropriations bill, that means they're not acting in good faith, ergo, we're done. Somebody would do a motion to vacate, there'd be a new speaker's race, and whatever happens, what happens. But, it's very fluid. Tensions are high. Not to mention we have families at home going through stuff. And so it's a bit of a tinderbox up here, politically speaking. But we're going to meet at 4 o'clock Eastern time to hash some of this out. Who knows what happens next.
Congressman, help us understand the room and the reaction when there was a realization on the part of leadership that the 21 Republicans were not going to be swayed by the possibility of a continuing resolution. I can imagine you described it as heated. I can only imagine that it got pretty feisty.
Well, they knew last night that it wasn't going to pass. They decided to go ahead and put it up for a vote, just so they could counter votes, see who might they be able to peel off, kind of thing. This is where the horse trading starts, by the way. So, like, if you're wanting to get something, like, this is where people kind of quote unquote sell out, right? But the margins are too big for them to it's not like they need to peel off 2 or 3 votes. They need 16 votes, and that's just not going to be attainable. So then what do we do? Like, that's the next, as adults in the room, what do we do next? What's the way forward? It doesn't mean that we're going to have a 2-3 week shutdown. And by the way, it's not a shutdown, it's a slowdown. Almost every function of government works during a quote unquote shutdown, but we can talk about that in a minute. But, so do we force a 3-week period of time where government is quote unquote shut down, and we just plow through the remaining appropriations bills and do what we said? That's an option. Another would be this idea, which I'm not in love with, of, okay, let's do a 7-day. If we see progress, we'll do another 7-day. The third option, which I don't think would happen, is someone just drops a motion to vacate. That would be the nuclear option. I think that would be a mistake, quite frankly, if somebody were to do that, because that creates more division at a time when we're trying to find a path forward on how we, again, figure out how we're going to govern this country.
Congressman Andy Ogles with the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk right now, talking about the recent vote failing to pass a continuing resolution, which means that a partial or I like that terminology, Andy, slowdown is imminent starting tomorrow night at midnight. I want to read you a quote from the speaker and get you to react to it, because I imagine you have a different characterization of what's going on. He said just before this vote that just happened, every member will have to go on record. Are they willing to secure the border, or do they side with President Biden on an open border and vote against a measure to keep government open? I'm expecting that as a no vote, Congressman. You disagree with the characterization that it was your vote to side with Biden and an open border when you voted earlier today.
Yeah, that's absolutely absurd. Again, I think it's not productive when folks make those types of comments. I'm not here to disparage any member of Congress, but at the end of the day, like I said earlier, We could have stayed that first week of August. We could have stayed up here the second week of August. We could have stayed up here the third and the fourth week of August. We could have gotten this done. I don't control the calendar. If I did, nobody would have left. We would have stayed here and finished. And that would have made some people upset. But they ran for this job. They said they wanted to do the work. Then they should be here and do it. That's why I was here last weekend. Now, I did fly home to be with my family on Sunday. I wanted to be with my family on a Sunday, but I immediately came back to be here on Monday. So to now try to shift the blame to someone else because as the leader of our caucus, you didn't schedule us for August. I think most people would understand that was what we should have done. We could have worked last weekend, but everybody was sent home. About 24 of us decided to stay behind and figure out a path forward. And it should be noted, the 4 bills that came to the floor, that was done because members of Congress got together and said, you know what, we're not getting any help from leadership. What if we come together and start moving these things ourselves? That's how it really played out. And so, again, I don't think it's productive when I start blaming you for something or blaming Dan Mandis for something, right? I mean, now we're attacking each other instead of focusing on the issue at hand. We have to pass 12 appropriations bills. And that is the only thing we should be talking about and figuring out a plan. And so myself and it was 20 other Republicans sent a letter to the leader last night, speaker, I should say, saying, hey, lay out a plan for us. Like, what's next steps? If it doesn't go right, what are we going to do? And but anyway, at the end of the day, regardless of what he says, I have a job to do.
And Congressman Andy Ogles joining us, gracious with his time in the aftermath of this vote. I know that I've got to take a break, Bell, but just one more question of Andy. And actually it's a two-parter. One, to your knowledge, and this is just the curiosity getting the better of me, Andy Ogles, you were a no vote. Anybody else in Tennessee vote no, to your knowledge?
Tim Burchett.
Tim Burchett voted no as well.
I don't know if Harshbarger did. I'm not sure, so I don't want to throw her under the bus, but she was leaning no, but Tim Burchett and I did for sure.
All right, and what are next steps once we see leadership cool off a little bit and understand? I would think the next steps in a perfect scenario is to get to work, as you just mentioned, on the 12 appropriations bill and make this shutdown as short as possible.
Absolutely. And so also keep in mind, so today is payday for federal workers. Today is payday for the military. And so federal workers get paid for this next month. So they're good. The military gets paid for 2 weeks. So we actually have about, if you include tomorrow, 13, 14 days to make some very good progress before anybody doesn't get paid. And right. So I'm dedicated to getting up early, to staying late, to working weekends. I will put as much time in, as many hours as required to get this done. But this is going to require the leadership saying, okay, we get it. We're going to pass 12 appropriations bills.
Andy, thank you for giving us an update from Washington, D.C. and the hard work you're doing up there, and we appreciate that vote. A lot of your constituents reaching out on the super text line and saying, shut it down until you get some spending concessions. Go ahead and shut it down. So we appreciate you, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Thank you, and God bless.
All right, there's Andy Ogles spending some time with us, giving us his take on what went down just earlier in Washington, D.C. 54 after the hour. Quick timeout. Back in a moment on The Murphy Show.
2 o'clock. I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. That's enough, Dan Mandis. 82 degrees right now, partly sunny in Middle Tennessee. A complete weather forecast just a few minutes away. At the retirement ceremony for General Mark Milley today, President Biden delivered some of his strongest criticism yet of House Republicans on the issue of government funding and a shutdown. Karen Travers.
President Biden slammed House Republicans for what he called a dereliction of duty.
The House fails to fulfill its most basic function. It fails to fund government by tomorrow. We'll have failed all our troops.
The president said Washington should not be playing politics while U.S. troops, quote, stand in the breach.
Our service members will keep upholding their oaths, showing up for work, standing sentinel around the world, keeping our country secure, but they won't get paid.
Right now in Tennessee, a man, 31-year-old Nantis Van Vuren, was killed last night after his pickup truck rolled off of a tow truck and ran him over. The tow cable broke. Van Vuren began to run after his truck. That truck then lost the momentum it had. It rolled back and knocked Van Vuren onto the ground, killing him on the scene. And a long-awaited arrest in the killing of rapper Tupac Shakur, who was gunned down on the Vegas Strip in 1996. It's now been confirmed that a previously identified witness to the murder of the hip-hop icon, Dwayne Keith Davis, has been arrested in the Las Vegas area. Alex Stone was the first to obtain footage of the recent search of Davis's home.
We know he was interviewed, and depending on what he said and based on his previous statements, it may be less on evidence and more somewhat circumstantial and piecing it all together based on his comments as well and where they know he was that night. Did they find something in his home? Maybe. That we know that they took a lot of documents. They took a lot of newspaper articles and magazines and other things. The search warrant that we have listed a copy of Vibe magazine on Tupac, among other things that were taken.
And sources have been told in the last couple of weeks that the bullets that were retrieved in the search of his home, that they did not match the shell casings from the crime scene. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
Sorry, Matt.
Although I agree with you. Bell K. Hello and welcome back. It is hour number 3 of the Matt Murphy Show, 206 to be precise, on Super Talk 99.7 WT, and it's our episode 425 with you today, and we're live from California Closets. It's their big 25th anniversary celebration. Stop by and see us. I won't belabor this point, but they have so many reasons for you to stop by, having nothing to do with Matt Murphy. There's a tour of the beautiful facility that is California Closets here at the Berry Hill location on Winford, Avenue. In lovely Nashville. They're celebrating 25 years of helping Tennesseans get the most out of their closets, their garages, and their pantries. You can take a tour. You can drink some delicious Amber Falls wine. You can enjoy music. You can enjoy food. It is the largest charcuterie board that I've ever seen in my life. And you can meet wonderful people like I've just met. Janelle is with us on the Matt Murphy Show to talk about an organization called Thistle Farms that I know nothing about, but she's going to educate all of us. Hello, Janelle. How are you?
Hello. So good to be here. Nice to meet you today, Matt. And I completely agree. That is the biggest charcuterie board I've ever seen in my life.
Never seen anything like it.
I know. It's amazing.
Have you had some cheese back there?
I have. I've had a lot of cheese, a lot of there's like these little pickled okra things that are.
Come on.
Yeah, I know.
I know.
Weird. I'm weird.
No, I love that. That's good.
Yeah.
Bell K has requested that you not put the camera on me, that you put it on Janelle. But he makes that request every day, no matter who's in studio. He just doesn't want the camera on me. So I think that's
a lie. I just want to look at her.
Well, I don't blame you. I don't, well, between me and really anybody else, anybody else is the preferred option. Tell me what Thistle Farms is.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about the Thistle Farms as an organization. Is it a farm?
It is not. And I am actually very, very grateful that you asked that question, because a lot of people don't know who we are, or a lot of people get confused of who we actually are. So a lot of people kind of know us through, we have products like candles and body and home products in Whole Foods, or like we're literally in like everybody's best friend's guest bathroom across Nashville. But a lot of people don't actually know who we are and what our mission is. And so our mission, we are a nonprofit social enterprise that supports women survivors of human trafficking, prostitution, and addiction. And so the way that we do that, we give them 2 years. So our residents or any of our survivors that come through Thistle Farms, we give them 2 years completely free housing, free health care, free counseling, for the purpose of just allowing them to piece themselves back together, allowing them to heal from all that trauma. And then we're also able to provide them meaningful employment. So they actually work for Thistle Farms to create these really healing products, not just for themselves, but for our consumers as well. And then, of course, we give them that strong sisterhood of support, which we don't even give to them, right? That just comes naturally with being in a home full of women with similar stories and similar traumatic incidences, and so that they're able to heal and support each other together through their recovery.
So the products that we see on in the end of the process, that's just an end result of a process that kind of goes unseen.
Yes.
On the consumer side of things.
Yes, and every single product that Thistle Farms produces, of course, is made by a survivor of human trafficking, prostitution, and addiction. So whenever anybody purchases one of those products, just like you said, we're in California Closets today. California Closets is a really great partner of ours, and they actually purchased 1,000 of our candles, and they're planning on purchasing more, because I mean, California Closets does such great work, and the idea is that every client of theirs gets a candle once they're finished with their product. But all of those products are made by survivors of our program.
How old is the organization?
Oh, gosh, you're going to test me on my math here. So I will just say that we were founded in 1997, and our social enterprise started in 2001. Mm-hmm. So the reason why there's two dates there. So 1997, our founder, she opened the organization. She opened the residential program. So the 2 years of rent-free housing and whatnot, that was open. And down the road, again, math, but down the road in 2001, she realized, okay, this is working. Mm-hmm. The counseling piece is working. Free counseling, free housing, free healthcare is working. But one thing that we were running into is that the women that we're serving, they're still dirt poor. Mm-hmm. So there's a huge aspect of poverty that plays into that piece. So the women that come to us, they aren't able to get jobs. And so that's when she said, okay, well, how can we do that for them? Mm-hmm. And so we opened Thistle Farms. So 1997, the residential program was named Magdalene. 2001, we opened Thistle Farms, which is a social enterprise. Somewhere down the road, we merged those two together because it got confusing.
Because you're taking people that have been often through no fault of their own. I don't want to presume to know better than you, but through no fault of their own, they've been drugged through hell and back, and you're trying to help them, get these aspects of their lives back together. And part of that is reintegrating them into a working environment.
Right. And so we didn't just want to be like, okay, here's this for free, but then where do they go afterwards?
Right. Congratulations. You've been here for 2 months. See you later.
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
Thing. Right.
And so the idea there and the real goal was that after the 2-year residency, they are self-sustaining. So they're able to create lives for themselves even after us and not even think that there isn't any option going back to where they were before. So that really is the crux of Thistle Farms, is creating an environment for a survivor so that they're able to be self-sustaining, they're able to provide for themselves, for their family, and not even think about, okay, well, maybe I'll just go back to this because maybe that was a better option. And it never is.
I've developed an association with a group called the Tennessee Faith and Freedom Coalition, and they've made the scourge of human trafficking a central part of their mission to try to stop human trafficking as it exists in the United States of America today. And I found when we discuss these things, or when I watch this organization talk to groups about it, there's an obvious awareness that it's going on, but I think there's a lot of head in the sand attitude that we want to believe that this is something that happens in other countries.
Right.
We want to believe that this is something that doesn't happen here, but it is very real, and it is very here, not just in the United States, but in the state of Tennessee. Speak to that.
Yeah, definitely. There is it is that head in the sand dynamic where it's and there's this misunderstanding because a lot of people think that it's this concept of like dungeons and chains, where unfortunately that's real, but a really large percentage of what actually happens, it doesn't start that way. A huge percentage of the women that we serve were abused as early as 6 years old to 8 years old. And from there, that's the life that they knew. That's the life that they started to learn about. That's normalized for them. They're sexualized at a young age. So they turn to the streets. They turn to drugs to learn how to cope. And then from there, they're very, very vulnerable, and they're very susceptible to predators, to addiction and things like that. It's not just in a different country, right? It's in the streets. It's right next door. So it's very, very common. And just to put numbers to it, we have 6 homes here in Nashville, 36 beds in Nashville, and we have a consistently full wait list. So it is an issue that happens in Nashville. It's right next door.
We were talking. I was at a group meeting about a week ago or so, and a statistic that came across from the Tennessee Faith and Freedom Coalition was that we want to also pretend that those of us that face the issue as it exists in the United States of America think that, for example, the southern border is exacerbating the problem. And the statistic that stuck out to me was that 83% of children that are trafficked in the United States of America are from the United States of America. So it's not as if these are young people coming from other countries and then utilizing that cloak of darkness to exploit them here. They're coming from here as well. And I just think it's such an important issue. I'm so glad to be able to meet with you and talk to you about it. How can we help Thistle Farms?
Yeah, Thistle Farms. So this is where I put the salesperson plug in, right?
Yeah.
We are an actual storefront. So we do have a brick and mortar off Charlotte Pike. We're a store, we're a cafe, we're a coffee shop. So of course we absolutely love when people come in and just share community. Any money that anybody spends in Thistle Farms, a cafe, whether they get food, whether they purchase a product, that goes back into all of our programs. Corporate gifting is a really, really huge way to support. So just like California Closets has done, they've given us 1,000 things to make. So one that obviously pours into financing a lot of our programs, but that provides that really large part of our mission to provide that meaningful employment. So what's really cool about what California Closets did is they took this candle, and we have a wooden top to one of our candles, and they were able to, for the first time ever, we were able to brand California Closet's brand into the top of our candles. So that was just something new for our residents and our employees to learn, and those fine skills to learn to take on with them whenever they're trying to create something of their own. And so with that, purchasing products, and then of course a simple donation like $50 can help with a resident's groceries for an entire week, and that's a huge deal. Has anyone gone to get groceries lately? It's expensive.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, so just things like that, donating, purchasing our products, and then of course just sharing who we are, what we do, is always so important.
How can people find out more online?
Yeah, so if you go to thistlefarms.org, all the information is there. What we do, of course, our mission, links to our shop, links to products. So yeah, that's probably the easiest way, or follow us. We're just Thistle Farms.
THISTLE?
Yes.
Thistlefarms.org.
Yes.
Janelle, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
We appreciate that. We'll take a quick time out, 17 after the hour. The Matt Murphy Show continues from California Closets in a moment on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
A looming government shutdown, and U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein has passed away at the age of 90. That and more 30 minutes after the hour of 2 o'clock here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Thank you much, Mac Morey. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. It is 2:21. Happy Friday. Hope everybody's having a great day. It looks like most of the rain has left the area, although I see a few clouds outside as we broadcast from California Closets. Would love to see you guys. We'll be around a little after 3 o'clock today. We're at the Berry Hill location. That's at Winford Avenue. Kurt Schusterman opened this shop, he said, in 2020. He's been here for 25 years in the city, and he opened this particular location several years ago, and it is a beautiful facility celebrating 25 years of helping Tennesseans get the most out of their closets, their garages, and their pantries. And when we decided to come out, and, Kurt is paying the bills here for our broadcast today, and we wanted to know what Kurt wanted to talk about. All Kurt wanted us to do was to talk to the many wonderful charitable organizations within our community that do great work and that have a partnership with California Closets. He said, I want you to talk to Our Place. I want you to talk to Thistle Farms, and I want you to talk to Nashville Rescue Mission. And with that in mind, we welcome back Cheryl to the show. You hear Cheryl? Well, I know we heard Cheryl last year quite a bit as we were doing our radiothon from Nashville Rescue Mission. And Glenn is also with us to talk about their wonderful organization and some progress and some challenges in the city of Nashville. Lady and gentlemen, hello. How are y'all?
Hey, we're doing great. Thank you for having us.
Tell me, I wish, I said right before we came on air, I would love to put you guys out of business. I would love to try to help you guys find another job, because that means that we've gone a long way in solving the issue of homelessness in the city of Nashville and the surrounding community. But sadly, it seems that it's worse, not better nowadays. Cheryl, speak to where we are in terms of our community and your needs at the Rescue Mission.
Sure. 2 years ago, we brought women and children to the men's campus while we built our brand new women's campus. And the reason we decided we needed to build a new campus was we were seeing the increasing number of families, mothers with children. We had 8 family rooms, and by the time we left that building, there were probably 16 families with us. So they are now, today, we have 20 families and about 39 children with us. So that's one of the populations we've seen, but it's also in the men's population. I mean, our numbers keep continuing to rise. It's actually higher than before COVID.
It's Glenn, it's a part, when I first came to Nashville in 2021, I knew that I was coming to an it city.
Right.
I mean, everybody loves Nashville. Everybody loves to visit here. And the one better thing than visiting is to come and move and to meet the great people
right.
of the community. But with being an it city, you are also an it city in terms of battling the issue of homelessness. Talk about your experience and what you see at the mission.
Absolutely. The It City draws so many different people, but also draws those that are looking for help, looking for a way out, looking for a job, looking for that next step. And so we find them here in Nashville, and we're seeing those numbers grow, as Cheryl mentioned, the women and children families specifically. We're seeing that increase year after year after year. We, as you said even before we went on air, you would love to put us out of a job. We would love to be out of a job for sure. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So what we're trying to do is stay in front of the need and really to do the very best we can, to offer the very best we can, the best case management, best counseling, best therapy, best job readiness training, to move people from homelessness into productive living. And so we have an exit door to where we're pushing people out of the system with a hand on their back, saying, hey, we got some tools for you. We want to help you to get out of this situation. Unfortunately, the entrance door is wide open, so people are continuing to come in. Thankfully, we're able to move people out, but we're also be able to care for the people that are coming in. It's
one of the reasons that I love how you do your business at the Rescue Mission, because it is a loving hand, but there's also, is it fair to say, a firmness to that loving hand, that you have to meet us. We understand the serious nature of your plight. We understand the hopelessness of your plight.
Right.
But you have to be willing to meet us at a certain place in order for us to be able to help you in a long-term way.
No, that's exactly right. And sometimes it takes some time to get to that point from their perspective. So they're coming in and they're realizing that we're serious about getting you help. we're serious about moving you on and moving you out, but we need you to join with us in the seriousness to say that you're going to take responsibility for yourself, and then together we can really come up with a plan through case management to move you into productive living.
Is the I don't want to presume to know this, but, is one of the bigger challenges that you face the scourge of addiction, whether it's alcohol addiction or drug addiction? And, I mean, that seems to be the biggest and most immediate hurdle when someone walks through that entrance door, is that we have to not only help them break that cycle, but also help them understand that can't come through the door with them.
Absolutely.
That you have to be willing to make. That's the first commitment, is it not?
It is. And just over the last 3 to 5 years, we've seen an influx in the opioid, of course, and then our staff use of Narcan, and now it's FDA approved for over-the-counter. I don't know if you
I saw it the other day at the pharmacy, right on the counter of the pharmacy.
And so our staff are using Narcan, sometimes more than even one Narcan dose for a particular client, but saving people from overdose. And the fentanyl problem that you hear about on the news, it's very real in homelessness as well. And so we're dealing with that. And we're just, again, as I said at the beginning, we're trying to stay ahead of the game. We're trying to stay ahead of the drugs. We're trying to stay ahead of what's happening and provide these people that are precious people, but many of them, as you said, are dealing with substance abuse. Unfortunately, a large number are dealing with mental health issues as well, and sometimes both together, substance abuse and mental health issues. And so it makes our job difficult, but we don't give up. We try as hard every single day to move people into productive living.
How long has the campus overlap been going on?
It's at least 2.5 years.
Yeah. That's Cheryl laughing to keep from crying. You saw that, right?
Right.
How much longer?
Well, we're ribbon cutting October 25th, and we are hoping and praying we're going to move the women and children before Thanksgiving into that new building. So everyone is ready. It's been a miracle that we've been able to keep everybody safe over the last 2.5 years. It's not ideal. The kids don't have a playground, so they're hanging on the trees outside, but we're excited to have them in a brand new, beautiful state-of-the-art building.
And for those that, and not to interrupt you, Cheryl, but for those that don't know, I mean, it is for it's best practices and for everyone's safety that you keep the men's campus and the women's and children's campus separate.
Correct.
But you've been building a women's and children's mission, and so you've been under the same roof for that 2.5-year time frame. Although, as I took the tour last year, I was fascinated with how you make that work. I mean, you make food schedule, breakfast, lunch, and dinner schedules, and everything else to the point that, and I don't know why this gets me more than anything, but Cheryl took me by the pet room.
Yes.
I mean, the rescue mission has a pet room because you don't want that to be an impediment for people to get help, to get assistance.
That's right. Many people come to us and say, well, I have a pet dog with me, so it can't stay here. Yes, you can. We're going to care for both of you in a responsible way.
That's so cool. What? Talk to me about the relationship between the rescue mission and California Closets. How did you guys get to know Kurt?
So Kurt, back we were doing the radiothon in the fall, and he heard the radiothon and got on the radio and online and said, I want to do a matching pledge for everybody that gives during this hour. And so that's how we became acquainted at the very first place. And then our relationship from there has just grown. He has totally California Closets has transformed our men's gift in kind clothing room. It's state of the art. It's beautiful. I showed it to my wife, and she said, "I would like something like that in our house." It's just beautiful the way the storage and everything is laid out. And then also we have 49 wardrobes that they're donating to the new women's campus. And a total of $80,000 or so. Just that's Kurt's heart. Is what can I do to help and how can I help? And so that relationship that started with the radiothon a couple of years ago has really transformed into a very wonderful relationship of California Closets caring for the hurting.
Well, and it's one of the things that makes me doing a program like this at his location so easy because Kurt, he walks the walk.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to talk about giving,
Right.
but just the concept of, hey, Kurt, come on the air. No, I'm not going on the air. Cheryl and Glenn are going on the air. I want
Right.
you to talk about the Nashville Rescue Mission, or I want you to talk about these wonderful charitable organizations. You know what? You can mention me, but mention me only after you mention these wonderful organizations.
Yeah, that's his heart, and it shows every single day in what he does for the underprivileged and the poor. Not just Nashville Rescue Mission, Thistle Farms, and many others. Just incredible community partners.
What can we do? I know it's fall. That means that busy season is upon you.
Correct.
What can we do to assist the rescue mission?
Well, certainly you can come and volunteer. We always need volunteers. We have a lot of volunteer opportunities. In fact, we're building bunk beds next week at the women's campus because we got a delivery of 369 bunk beds, and we have to put them together. We're building a playground next week as well. But obviously, the outpouring of donations is also welcomed. We have 2 campuses coming online, and so we'll have the operating for both of those campuses. And we really don't know what it's going to mean to us, this coming year. So we're really planning, being very thoughtful about what we need for both those campuses. You can pray for us. We need a lot of prayer, especially as we move back over. And come and take a tour. We have tours. In fact, we have one on Saturday. It's the I Had No Idea tour. We call it that because people say, I had no idea. I didn't realize you did this work.
Amen.
So, yeah.
Good for you guys. And this is a selfish question, but will we get during the radiothon, will we be at the women's campus, the women's and children's campus, or will we be at the old campus?
We'll be at the old one this year.
That's okay.
But we'll have women. I know the last couple of years we've had women and men answering the phones. Previously, just because we're at the men's campus, we only asked the men to answer the phone. But we're going to keep it that way, where women come in the morning or the afternoon and men answer the phones the other shift.
I just love that. I'm sorry. I just love that when people call in to donate and they speak to somebody that is recipient of their care.
Yeah, they're speaking to those that they are helping with their generous donations. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. When I'm not on the radio during my portion of the radiothon, I'll go do a remote from the women's campus and call back into home base, which is at the Nashville Rescue Mission. We'll send it all back to the radio station. How about that?
That'd
That
be
sounds
great.
good?
That's great.
Guys, thank you for the God's work that you do.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. There's Glenn and Cheryl with the Nashville Rescue Mission. 33 after the hour. Back in a moment on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
.233, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. 83 degrees right now. A partly sunny day in Music City. Looking like a mostly sunny weekend as well, with highs staying in the mid-80s. No rain in the forecast for the next few days. Full weather forecast in 2 minutes. The clock ticking down to a likely government shutdown at 12:01 a.m. Sunday, October 1st. Lawmakers frantically working on several measures to try and avoid the lapse in government funding, but there's no resolution in sight. Karen Travers.
White House Budget Director Shalonda Young said by not funding the government, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and his fellow Republicans are going back on the budget deal reached earlier this year as part of the debt ceiling negotiations.
We shook hands, 2/3 of Congress voted for it, and the president signed it into law. A commitment to the American people that reduced the deficit, protected critical programs, and ensured their government remained open.
Calling them, quote, extreme, Young said House Republicans need to stop playing political games and keep the government open.
And U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein has passed away at the age of 90 years old. Feinstein was the oldest member serving in the Senate at the time of her death, and she spent many of her final months in declining health. In recent years, Feinstein resisted calls from fellow Democrats to resign. And as the UAW expanded its strike at Ford and GM, both sides are disputing the other's positions in the standoff over pay and benefits. Brian Clark has some details.
Ford's president and CEO Jim Farley said the company's latest offer would put its UAW members among the world's best paid hourly manufacturing workers.
We made it so the average employee fresh out of high school or the military or a service sector job will earn 6 figures within 4 years.
He said the UAW's holding out over electric battery plants that will not be open for years. He said while there's still time to reach a deal,
but not much more time given the fragility of the supply base.
Friday's strike expansion included a Ford plant in Chicago.
And that is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Morey, WTN News.
Here we are. Here we go. 240 Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Waning moments of the Matt Murphy Show for this day and this week. We're at California Closets, as we've been mentioning. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mason. Appreciate that. I was unaware that my computer was yapping at me there. We're at California Closets, and you can see us online on the SuperTalk TV side of things, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. You can also obviously listen to us on 99.7 FM and any of your internet streaming platforms. We appreciate you. Appreciate this California Closets folks for having us out on a First Amendment Freestyle Friday. A group of 21 GOP members joined every Democrat in sinking the stopgap funding bill today, raising the chances that we're going to see a government shutdown happening over the weekend. Now, as noted by Congressman Andy Ogles, who was on with us earlier this hour, and we appreciate Congressman Ogles for coming on, he was one of the 21 Republicans voting against this stopgap measure. Stopgap, continuing resolution, call it what you will, it amounts to the same thing. Those that voted against it included Andy Ogles, Tim Burchett of the state of Tennessee, along with representatives like Matt Gaetz of Florida, Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, and Nancy Mace of South Carolina. And the biggest point of contention, and I don't disagree with it, comes from these so-called hardliners when they suggest that Kevin McCarthy should have seen this impasse coming. He should have seen it coming that several members of the GOP, with their razor-thin, narrow majority, would not be willing to move off the idea of a continuing resolution to continuing to fund government without the premise or the promise that we're going to pass appropriations bills separately and with regular order. Now, Kevin McCarthy, as Speaker of the House, has gone a long way to restoring what is known as regular order in Washington, D.C. But this idea that he was willing to allow the membership to go home on recess, on break, without coming to some form of agreement, not with the Democrats, he doesn't have to do that, but with his own colleagues in the GOP, with his own caucus in the GOP, indicates to me and indicated to them that he felt like they'd crumble at the last hour. Well, they did not crumble. GOP leadership could not corral those members of their conference. In the meantime, this CR is a dead issue as it stands today, and it remains to be seen this afternoon and moving into the weekend exactly what they're going to do to try to move forward. You can either waste a lot of time and energy trying to cobble together enough votes to get to a continuing resolution, which is not a good way of funding government, or better yet, allow the government to quote-unquote shut down. I like what Andy Ogles said earlier. It's more of a slowdown than a shutdown. Essential services are never disrupted, and everyone's made whole. And, oh, by the way, it just so happens that today is payday for individuals within the government. So you already have an embedded 2-week or thereabouts, a 2-week span of time that you can get something done, and you won't see one single paycheck disrupted. But no Social Security checks will be disrupted. Obviously, those in the United States military at some point would have their pay disrupted, but they are always made whole. They are always made whole. That said, we will see a shutdown. The media will freak out about it. But know this, as I said at the beginning of the show, 65% of the American people, if not more, won't notice any disruption in their lives whatsoever. The people that live in Washington, D.C., the people that work in Washington, D.C., the people that are a part, either willingly or unwillingly, of the swamp, like to believe that the rest of the globe revolves around every action that they make in Washington, D.C., and it's just not the case. Most of you, if you noticed any disruption whatsoever, it would be a matter of a national park or some sort of federally controlled service available to you normally would not be available to you during a typical government shutdown. If you work for the government, you might see a disruption in your pay if this thing's lasting longer than middle of the month in October. But other than that, you're not going to notice it. And, for them to make it the huge deal that they are making it is to suggest that a lot of these functions of government are absolutely necessary, and they're not. They're just not. what is more frustrating to anyone, and what has been noted by numerous individuals on the super text line, is that Zelensky apparently is still going to get paid because that's money that's already been allocated. It is a crying shame that we can't get more accountability for that allocation of funds, and it's a secondary shame that they will insist that those funds get paid while our American servicemen would have to go without a paycheck. In the meantime, on the super text hotline, or on the super text line, let's see, Jim there says, Matt, thank you for your heart. Appreciate that. Danny says, did y'all go to all-day paid commercials? No, Danny. We are at California Closets. Now, they paid for us to be out here today during our time between noon and 3. But when I asked if Kurt wanted to come on air with us, he preferred that I offer some charitable organizations a little airtime in order to highlight and to draw attention to those charitable organizations. We talk a lot about the issues that matter to you and to me and to the rest of Tennessee and the rest of the United States of America. I frankly don't think that we talk often enough about the people that do such good work in a charity function. And taking a bit of time on a Friday afternoon to do that, I'm not going to apologize to that for that for a moment, and I'm not going to apologize in thanking California Closets for making that a possibility that we can highlight charitable organizations like Thistle Farms or like the wonderful Nashville Rescue Mission. So, but I do appreciate that. It's a different kind of show, and I know that is a disruption into the regular routine, but it's one that I'll do willingly if we can highlight and focus on some of those organizations. I don't apologize for that for one bit. All right, 46 after the hour, and I'm going to take a short time out, and then when we return, we'll find out what's going on with Brian Wilson and The Drive this Friday afternoon. I imagine that Brian's going to discuss the looming government shutdown at one point or another during his time between 3 and 7. We'll do that next on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Andy Ogles joins the Matt Murphy Show and talks government shutdown, threats to metro schools, and an arrest made for an alleged killer of a popular rapper from the 90s. Those stories and more at 3 o'clock right here. Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
It is Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Before we check in with Brian Wilson, I just wanted to thank my friend. Look, he brought us a toast. A toast to the end of at least my week, not to the end of yours. Kurt Schusterman joins us on the show. Hey, man, how are you?
Good to see you.
Cheers.
Bud. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting us out to your place.
It's been great. I appreciate you being here.
25 years, huh?
25 years serving Nashville. Man, the city has been so good to us.
Well, you've been good to the city, too.
That's what we do. That's why I bought the business, actually. We bought it of course, to make some money, but our heart is to give back to the community, and the way that Nashville continues to support us, it's just an honor to be able to give back.
Well, as soon as I get done talking with Brian Wilson, I'm going to join you in this toast. So thank you.
Thanks,
thank you. There's Kurt Schusterman of California Closets. Brian Wilson joining us in here to talk about what he's got going on for the drive from 3 until 7 this afternoon. And Brian, I don't want to speculate or program your show for you, but I imagine there'll be a little government shutdown talk. What do you think?
What? They're going to shut down the government?
I have this question for you, Brian, and you have been there, you've done that. I mean, everyone knows your level of experience with the swamp, and I can't for the life of me understand what McCarthy was thinking going home. That's what everybody kind of goes back to. They went home for weeks without having this issue resolved.
Well, I mean, it's a tradition. If you're talking about the August recess, that almost never anybody in Washington in August. But it would have behooved them to have stuck around, perhaps, and work on this. Look, I've seen these things happen. Sometimes there's a last minute solution, and sometimes we shut down the government, and it takes a few days to figure out how you're going to resolve it. But I'm telling you, two things about this vote today in the House. One of them is that it looks like we are probably headed toward a shutdown. Not absolutely certain yet, but it's feeling that way. And the other part of it is we may have a new Speaker of the House out of this whole thing. It seems like that is also a distinct possibility. So this is a big deal, big dog deal, they say.
Who would you speculate if that were to come to fruition? Who are the leaders in the clubhouse in turn? I mean, or do we have the ability to speculate on that yet, Brian?
Well, there are a few names that are being tossed about. One of them, apparently, I did not know this. I'm not surprised because I think he's a real leader in Congress. Is that apparently they say that Mark Green has been asked to run for Speaker several times and he's declined.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It really speaks to, I think, how he is held in high esteem by just about everybody, and I think he's one of the real leaders in the House of Representatives. I don't know who they might pick. Again, remember how many times it took us to get McCarthy? What was it, 15 rounds or something like that? So who knows?
A lot of sorting out to do out of Washington, D.C. What else is going on the drive this afternoon?
Well, I just wanted to share with you because I know you still go back to Alabama and travel back and forth a lot, and I just wanted you to know that I found out. So just so that you don't make a mistake, it is illegal to carry a skunk across state borders into Tennessee. I just want you to know that in case you ever get the idea to carry a skunk.
Well,
my response.
Well, you need to be talking about wife. Because she's the one that brought the skunk to Tennessee, not the other way around. So I think Erica carries the skunk as long as she's driving when we cross borders from Alabama to Tennessee. Who knew some of these crazy laws that we have in Tennessee?
Yeah, there are some crazy ones. I'm going to do at some point. I've got a list. It was put up by WKRN. Things that may have heard are laws that aren't laws, and certain things you may not know are laws in the state of Tennessee. It'll be fun.
There's Brian Wilson. He's coming up in mere moments after we hear from Mac Morey in the newsroom with all of the headlines you need to know about. It's The Drive, carrying us home until 7 o'clock tonight. That's going to wrap it up for us from California Closets. We'll be here for a few more moments if you want to swing by as time allows. The Drive is up next. Have a wonderful weekend, folks. It's football season. Hope your team wins, unless your team is Auburn. And if your team is Auburn, go Dogs. In that case, we'll say happy weekend, back on Monday, bright and early at high noon. Until then, so long.